My son told me, "Dad, I found you the perfect nursing home. You'll be happier there." But when I discovered what he'd really been planning behind my back for months, I realized this wasn't about my happiness at all. What I found in his computer changed everything I thought I knew about my own son. At 67 years old, I thought I'd seen every possible betrayal life could throw at me. Margaret and I had been married for 42 years before cancer took her 2 years ago. In that time, I'd learned that people aren't always what they seem. Friends disappear when you need them most. Neighbors who smile and wave can spread gossip behind your back. Even family members can let you down when times get tough. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for discovering that my own son David, the boy I raised with my own hands, had been systematically planning to steal everything I'd worked for my entire life. My name is Robert Thompson, and if you're watching this, I need you to understand something crucial. When the people closest to you betray your trust, it doesn't just break your heart. It shatters your faith in everything you believed about family, loyalty, and love. But sometimes, just sometimes, that betrayal can also set you free. The nightmare began 3 months ago with what seemed like innocent concern. David, my 42-year-old son, began visiting more often than he had in years. After Margaret's funeral, he'd been distant, calling only on holidays, showing up for obligatory birthday dinners with his wife Linda, but always seeming eager to leave. Our relationship had been strained since his teenage years, when every conversation turned into an argument about money, responsibility, or his future. Suddenly, he was stopping by twice a week, asking about my health, my daily routine, whether I was eating properly, if I was taking my medications on time. He'd bring groceries I didn't need, offer to help with household tasks I was perfectly capable of handling myself. "Dad, you're getting older," he'd say with that caring voice that I now know was completely fake. "I worry about you living alone in this big house. What if something happens? What if you fall and no one finds you for days? What if you forget to lock the doors at night?" At first, I was genuinely touched. After losing Margaret, I'd felt abandoned by everyone, including David. His sudden attention felt like a gift from heaven. Finally, my son cared about his old man. Finally, we could rebuild the relationship that had been damaged by years of misunderstandings and hurt feelings. I should have known better. I should have remembered that David had always been calculating, even as a child. When he wanted something, he'd become the perfect son until he got it. A new bicycle, permission to go to a party, money for college. He'd be charming, helpful, loving until the moment he got what he wanted. Then he'd go back to being distant and resentful. But I was lonely, grieving, and desperate for any connection with the only family I had left. Margaret had been my everything, my partner, my best friend. Without her, the house felt empty. My days felt meaningless. When David started showing interest in my life again, I grabbed onto that attention like a drowning man grabs a life preserver. The house David was so worried about sits on 3 acres of prime real estate just outside the city center. Margaret and I bought it 35 years ago when David was 7 years old. It was our dream home, a colonial-style house with 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a large kitchen, and a wraparound porch. The place where we planned to grow old together, watching grandchildren play in the backyard. The grandchildren never came. David and Linda had decided they didn't want kids. Too expensive, too much responsibility, David had told us years ago. Another disappointment to add to the growing list. But the house remained our sanctuary. Margaret filled it with love, laughter, and the smell of her famous apple pies. I maintained the property meticulously, keeping the lawn perfect, the gutters clean, the paint fresh. It was worth $800,000 now, maybe more in today's market. The house itself needed some updates, but the land was incredibly valuable, and David knew it. What I didn't know at the time was that he'd been struggling financially for years. His construction business was failing, he was behind on his mortgage payments, and Linda had been pressuring him to find money somewhere, anywhere, even if it meant destroying his own father. The nursing home conversation started casually, like seeds being planted in fertile soil. "Dad, have you ever thought about what you'd do if you couldn't live independently anymore?" David asked one Thursday afternoon while we sat on the front porch, the same porch where I used to read him bedtime stories when he was small. "I'm managing fine," I told him, rocking slowly in Margaret's chair. "The doctor says I'm in excellent health for my age. My mind is sharp. I can cook, clean, pay my bills, drive myself wherever I need to go. Why would I need to change anything? David nodded thoughtfully, like he was carefully considering my words. So of course, Dad, I'm not saying you need to do anything now. I'm just thinking ahead, you know? Planning for the future, being responsible. Responsible. That word would come up repeatedly in our conversations over the next few weeks. David was always talking about being responsible, making smart decisions, thinking about the future. What he didn't say was that he was thinking about his future, not mine. 2 weeks later, he brought me a glossy brochure. Sunset Manor, he said, spreading the colorful pages across my kitchen table like he was showing me vacation destinations. I drove by it yesterday, Dad. It's beautiful. They have activities, medical care on site, people your own age to socialize with. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore. The brochure showed smiling elderly people playing cards, tending small gardens, enjoying meals in a bright, cheerful dining room. The facility looked pleasant enough, modern and clean, but it wasn't home. This house, with its creaky floors and Margaret's rose garden still blooming outside the window, with the bedroom where I still kept her pillow on her side of the bed, this was home. I'm not ready for that. Son, I said firmly, closing the brochure, I'm not ready to give up my independence. David's expression changed for just a moment. A flash of frustration crossed his face before he quickly forced another smile. Of course not, Dad. I'm just showing you options. For when you're ready, if you're ever ready. But he kept bringing it up. Every single visit, without fail, he'd mention something about the house being too much for me to handle. The stairs were dangerous for someone my age. The yard was too big to maintain properly. The neighborhood was changing, becoming less safe. I was isolated here, lonely, at risk of accidents or medical emergencies. Think about Mom, he said one afternoon, and that's when I knew he was deadly serious about this nursing home idea. Using Margaret's memory as emotional manipulation was crossing a line I never thought my son would cross. She always worried about you being too stubborn to ask for help when you needed it. She'd want you to be safe and properly cared for. Margaret would have wanted me to be happy. She would have wanted me to make my own choices about my own life, to maintain my dignity and independence for as long as possible. But I didn't say that to David. I was still trying desperately to believe his concern was genuine, that my son actually loved me. The real breakthrough moment came 3 weeks ago. Though I didn't understand its significance at the time, David had been visiting more frequently, sometimes with Linda, sometimes alone. He'd started asking more detailed questions about my finances, my pension, my investments, my savings. It's all casual, all carefully framed as concern for my future security. Dad, have you thought about what would happen to all your assets if something happened to you? He asked one evening, while we watched television together. Do you have everything properly organized? A current will. Power of attorney documents? I told him yes, I had an updated will. Everything would go to him when I died. The house, the savings account, the small but respectable investment portfolio Margaret and I had built over 4 decades of careful financial planning. He was my only child, my only heir. It seemed obvious and natural. That's good, Dad, really good. But what about while you're still alive? What if you became incapacitated somehow? Who would manage your affairs? Pay your bills? Make medical decisions? The way he said it made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. There was something too eager in his voice, too calculated in his questions. Like he was following a script. I suppose I'd need to designate someone, I said slowly, if it became necessary. I could help with that, David offered immediately, leaning forward in his chair. I could take care of everything for you. Make sure all your bills are paid on time. Handle any legal issues that come up. Coordinate with your doctors. It would give you complete peace of mind. Peace of mind. Another phrase that would haunt me later. That night, after David left, promising to research power of attorney documents, I couldn't sleep. Something about our conversation bothered me deeply, but I couldn't identify what exactly. David had been nothing but helpful, caring, responsible. So why did I feel so uneasy? I got up around 2 a.m. and wandered through the quiet house, ending up in my small office off the living room. This was where I kept important papers and the computer David had insisted I needed. You have to stay connected, Dad, he'd said when he bought it for me last Christmas. Email, the internet, it's how people communicate these days. You can't be left behind. I'd been grateful for the gift, even though I rarely used the computer for anything beyond checking the weather forecast and reading news articles. But that night, sitting alone at the desk in the darkness, I remembered something that made my blood run cold. David had set up the computer for me. He'd created all my accounts, chosen all my passwords, shown me how to use every program. He'd been very thorough, very helpful, very patient. He'd even offered to check my email for me sometimes, to make sure I wasn't missing anything important. What if he'd been checking more than my email? With trembling hands, I turned on the computer and started looking through the browser history, something David had shown me how to access months ago. Most of it was my own activity, weather websites and news articles, but scattered throughout were other sites, searches I didn't remember making, nursing homes in the area, real estate websites showing property values for my exact address, legal websites about power of attorney and elder care, financial planning sites discussing how to protect assets from nursing home costs. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through weeks of search history. Someone had been using my computer to research how to handle my life, my property, my future. And there was only one person besides me who had access to this machine. I kept searching through the computer files, and that's when I found the email account. Not my regular email address, but another one, created using my name but with an address I'd never seen before. The password was saved in the browser, so when I clicked on it, it opened immediately. What I found in that secret email account made me physically sick. Dozens of emails between David and Linda, discussing me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Email exchanges with nursing homes, inquiring about availability and costs. Messages with real estate agents about the current market value of my property and how quickly houses in my neighborhood typically sold. But the worst email was the most recent one, sent just 3 days before. It was from David to Linda, and when I read it, I had to grip the desk to keep from falling over. The nursing home visit is scheduled for next Tuesday. I told them Dad is becoming confused, possibly showing early signs of dementia. They said they can have a room ready within a week, if we need to move quickly. The power of attorney papers are ready to be signed. Once he signs them, I can start liquidating assets to pay for his care. The house should sell fast in this market. We'll be debt-free by Christmas. I read the email 3 times, hoping I was misunderstanding something, that there was some innocent explanation. But the words were crystal clear. David wasn't concerned about my well-being. He was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, gain legal control of my finances, and sell my beloved home to solve his own money problems. The boy I'd raised from birth, the son I'd sacrificed everything for, the child I'd loved unconditionally despite years of disappointment and heartache, was planning to steal my entire life. I printed the email with shaking hands and sat in my office until dawn, staring at the evidence of my son's betrayal. The house was completely silent, except for the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same clock Margaret had inherited from her mother. By the time the sun came up, painting the kitchen walls with golden light, I'd made a decision. David wanted to play games with my future. Fine. But he was about to learn that his old man wasn't nearly as helpless or confused as he thought. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Bill Morrison Law Office. "Bill," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "this is Robert Thompson. I need to see you today. It's urgent." "Robert, it's barely 7 a.m. What's wrong?" "My son is trying to steal everything I own and I need your help to stop him." There was a pause. "I'll be in the office in an hour. Come whenever you're ready." I hung up the phone and looked around my kitchen, at Margaret's china cabinet, at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals, at the window overlooking her rose garden. If David thought he could take this away from me, he was dead wrong. The war for my life was about to begin. Bill Morrison had been my attorney for 15 years, ever since I'd needed help with a property dispute involving our neighbors. He'd handled Margaret's will when she died, managed the legal side of my small contracting business before I retired, and guided me through various financial decisions over the years. If there was anyone I trusted completely in this world, it was Bill. His office hadn't changed much over the years. The same heavy wooden desk, the same leather-bound law books lining the walls, the same smell of coffee and old paper. But when I walked in that morning carrying the printed emails, everything felt different. I wasn't there for routine legal advice. I was there to protect my life from my own son. "Robert," Bill said, rising from his chair with genuine concern in his eyes. "You sounded terrible on the phone." "What's happening?" I handed him the printed email and watched his expression change as he read it. Bill was a man who'd seen everything in his 40 years of legal practice. Nasty divorces, bitter custody battles, families torn apart by greed and jealousy. But even he looked shocked as he read David's words about declaring me mentally incompetent and liquidating my assets. "Jesus, Robert, I'm so sorry. This must be devastating to discover. I need to know my options," I said, settling into the familiar chair across from his desk. Can he really do this? Can he have me declared incompetent and take control of my property? Bill was quiet for a long moment, thinking carefully. It's not easy to have someone declared mentally incompetent against their will, but it's not impossible either, especially if he can get medical professionals to support his claims. "And if you've already given him power of attorney—" "I haven't signed anything yet," I said quickly. "But he's been pushing hard for it, talking about being responsible, planning for the future." "Good. Don't sign anything without having me review it first." Bill leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "Robert, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How's your relationship with David been? Before this discovery, I mean." The question cut deep, but it was fair. "Complicated," I admitted. "It's been strained since he was a teenager. He was always resentful about something, always felt like Margaret and I didn't give him enough. Money, attention, opportunities. After Margaret died, he barely spoke to me for months, until recently. And now he's suddenly very concerned about your welfare." "Exactly. The change was so dramatic. I thought maybe losing his mother had made him realize how important family is. I thought maybe we could finally repair our relationship." Bill nodded grimly. "I've seen this pattern before, Robert. Adult children who've been distant or difficult suddenly become very involved when they smell inheritance money. The question is, what do you want to do about it?" What did I want to do? Part of me wanted to call David immediately, to scream at him, to demand explanations. Part of me wanted to pretend I'd never seen those emails, to go back to believing my son actually cared about me. But the biggest part of me, the part that had survived 67 years of life's disappointments and betrayals, wanted justice. "I want to protect myself," I said finally, "and I want him to face consequences for what he's planning." Bill smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I think we can arrange both of those things. But first, let me ask you something else. Are you absolutely certain about David's mental state? Is there any possibility he genuinely believes you need care?" I thought about our recent conversations, about David's behavior over the past 3 months. "No, I'm completely healthy, Bill. My doctor confirmed it just last month during my annual physical. My mind is sharp, my memory is perfect. David knows I don't need nursing home care. This is about money, pure and simple." "Then here's what we're going to do," Bill said, pulling out a legal pad and starting to write. "We're going to create a comprehensive protection plan. New legal documents that will make it nearly impossible for David to gain control of your assets. We'll establish a clear paper trail of your mental competency, set up safeguards that will hold up in court, and create a trap that will expose his true intentions." "What kind of trap?" Bill's smile became genuinely wicked. "We're going to give David exactly what he thinks he wants, and let him hang himself with it." We spent the next 2 hours planning my counterattack. Bill would draft new power of attorney documents that designated him, not David, as my representative if I became incapacitated. We'd create a new will that included specific provisions about what would happen if anyone tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Most importantly, we'd set up a sting operation to catch David in the act of attempting fraud. "Here's how it's going to work," Bill explained. "David is expecting you to be confused and easily manipulated. So that's exactly what we'll give him. I'll pose as a different attorney, someone David thinks he's hired to help manipulate you into signing documents. But the papers he thinks give him power over your life will actually be detailed confessions of his scheme. You think he'll fall for it?" "Robert, your son is planning to commit elder abuse and fraud. He's already demonstrated that he's willing to lie, manipulate, and steal from his own father. Men like that are usually so focused on the prize that they don't pay close attention to details. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, but it required perfect timing and flawless execution. Most importantly, it required me to give David one final chance to come clean. "Before we set the trap," Bill said, "I want you to have one honest conversation with your son. Give him an opportunity to tell you the truth about his financial situation and ask for help legitimately. If he takes it, we'll call off the whole operation and find a way to help him properly. And if he doesn't, then we'll know for certain that we're dealing with someone who's chosen greed over family, and we'll make sure he faces the consequences." I left Bill's office with a new sense of purpose. David had started this war by planning to steal my life, but I was going to finish it by giving him a chance to save his soul. That evening, I called David and invited him over for dinner. I told him I wanted to cook his favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, the same dish Margaret used to make when he was young. He seemed surprised by the invitation, but agreed to come. I spent the afternoon preparing the meal carefully, setting the table with Margaret's good china, lighting candles, trying to create an atmosphere of warmth and family love. This would be David's last chance to be honest with me, his final opportunity to choose being my son over being my enemy. David arrived at exactly 6 p.m., dressed nicely and carrying a small bouquet of flowers. "For Mom's grave," he said, handing me the flowers. "I thought we could visit her together soon." The gesture was thoughtful, and for a moment I allowed myself to hope that maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe the emails were taken out of context. Maybe David really did care about me. We ate dinner and talked about safe topics: the weather, local news, memories of David's childhood. For brief moments it felt like the old days, before everything went wrong between us. I found myself remembering why I loved this man despite everything. After dinner, we moved to the living room with glasses of whiskey, Margaret's favorite brand that I kept for special occasions. "David," I said, settling into my chair, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to give me a completely honest answer." He looked wary. "Okay. Is there anything you want to tell me? Anything about your life, your situation, your future plans? Anything at all that you think I should know?" This was his moment. This was when he could confess about his financial troubles, admit to his desperate situation, ask for help instead of trying to steal from me. I was prepared to forgive him, to find a way to help him legitimately, to rebuild our relationship on honest ground. David was quiet for a long time, staring into his whiskey glass. I watched his face carefully, hoping to see some sign of remorse, some indication that he was ready to tell the truth. Finally, he looked up at me with clear, steady eyes. "No, Dad, there's nothing I need to tell you. Everything in my life is fine." And in that moment, I knew there was no saving our relationship. David had looked me straight in the eye and chosen to lie, chosen to continue with his plan to rob me of my independence and my property. He'd chosen greed over love, deception over honesty, betrayal over family. "Are you absolutely sure?" I asked quietly. "Nothing at all." "I'm sure, Dad, everything's good." I nodded and finished my whiskey in one burning gulp. "All right then. I think it's time for you to go home." David seemed surprised by the abrupt end to the evening, but he didn't argue. He kissed my cheek at the door, told me he loved me, promised to call soon to schedule that nursing home visit. I watched him drive away and felt something die inside my chest. The son I'd loved was gone. The man who remained was a stranger and a dangerous one. The next morning I called Bill Morrison. "How did it go?" he asked. "Exactly as you predicted." He had every opportunity to be honest, and he chose to lie. "We're moving forward with the plan. I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow. When do you want to execute the trap?" "As soon as possible." David is getting impatient. He thinks he's close to winning. "He is close," Bill said grimly. "If you hadn't discovered his emails, if you weren't taking action now, he probably would have succeeded. A lot of elderly people fall victim to exactly this kind of scheme, but not me. No, Robert, definitely not you." That afternoon I executed the legitimate legal documents Bill had prepared, new power of attorney forms that gave him authority over my affairs if I became incapacitated. A revised will that included specific protections against inheritance challenges, medical directives that established my mental competency beyond any doubt. But most importantly, we set up the elaborate deception that would expose David's true character once and for all. The plan required careful choreography. Bill would call David, pretending to be Attorney Wilson from a different law firm. He'd claim to represent a confused elderly client who needed help understanding legal documents. He'd arrange a meeting where David thought he was helping to manipulate me into signing papers that gave him power of attorney. In reality, the documents would be detailed confessions of David's entire scheme, complete with admissions of his financial problems and his plans for my property. Every lie he told, every manipulation he attempted, would be recorded and witnessed. Are you sure you can pull this off? I asked Bill during our final planning session. Robert, I've been practicing law for 40 years. I've played every role imaginable in courtrooms, negotiations, and client meetings. Trust me, your son won't suspect a thing. And if something goes wrong, then we'll have learned something valuable about David's character, and we'll still have all the legal protections in place to stop him. 3 days later, the trap was set. Bill called David, using a fake name and a story about needing help with a difficult elderly client. David, thinking he'd found a lawyer willing to help him manipulate his father, eagerly agreed to a meeting. The appointment was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. David would come to my house with Attorney Wilson, and I would sign documents that he believed would give him control over my life. What would actually happen would change everything between us forever. That weekend, I prepared my house and my mind for the performance of my life. I scattered papers around my office, left bills sitting out on the kitchen counter, did everything I could to support David's narrative about my growing confusion and inability to manage my affairs. But inside, I was calm and focused. David had started this war by planning to steal my independence. I was going to end it by giving him exactly what he deserved. Justice was coming, and my son had no idea what was about to hit him. Tuesday arrived gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that seemed to match my mood perfectly. I spent the morning preparing my house for what would either be the greatest performance of my life or the final destruction of my relationship with my son. Probably both. I scattered some papers around my office, left bills sitting out on the kitchen counter, moved my reading glasses to different rooms as if I'd been forgetting where I put them. Every detail had to support David's narrative about my growing confusion and inability to manage my own affairs. At exactly 2 p.m., I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the living room window, I watched David get out of his silver sedan, followed by a man I recognized as Bill Morrison, but had never seen dressed so differently. Bill wore an unfamiliar gray suit, different glasses, and had styled his hair in a way that changed his entire appearance. Even knowing it was him, I might have been fooled if we'd passed on the street. David looked confident, almost excited. He was so close to getting what he wanted, he could barely contain himself. This was the day he would finally gain control over his confused old father's life and property. I opened the door before they could knock, playing my role as the slightly bewildered elderly man David needed me to be. "David," I said, perhaps a little too loudly, "and you must be the lawyer. Come in, come in. I hope you don't mind the mess. I've been having trouble keeping track of things lately." "This is Attorney Wilson from the Morrison Law Group," David said, his voice filled with false warmth. "He specializes in helping families with situations like ours." Bill, in his role as Attorney Wilson, spoke to me in the condescending tone typically used with elderly clients who might not understand complex legal concepts. "Mr. Thompson," he said, setting his briefcase on my kitchen table, "your son has explained your situation to me. He's very concerned about making sure you're properly protected as you get older." "Protected from what?" I asked, channeling genuine confusion into my voice. "Well, there are many things that could happen as we age," Bill replied smoothly. "You could become ill, suffer an injury, experience memory problems. Having proper legal documentation in place ensures that someone you trust can make decisions for you if you're unable to make them yourself." David nodded along earnestly, playing the role of the concerned son to perfection. "It's just a precaution, Dad. You'll still make all your own decisions. This just gives me the legal authority to help you if you need it." Bill opened his briefcase with a theatrical flourish and pulled out a thick stack of documents. To David, they looked like standard power of attorney papers, medical directives, and financial authorizations. In reality, they were something very different. What Bill had created was a masterpiece of legal deception. The documents looked completely legitimate, filled with proper legal language and official-sounding terminology. But buried within the dense text was a detailed confession of David's entire scheme, written as if David himself was admitting to his plans. "Now, Mr. Thompson," Bill said, putting on reading glasses and adopting a patient tone, "I need to explain what these documents mean. This first one gives your son the authority to manage your financial affairs if you become unable to do so yourself." As Bill explained each section, he was actually reading back David's own emails about selling my house, liquidating my assets, and using the money to pay his debts. But he presented it all as if these were legitimate protective measures I was agreeing to. "This clause allows your son to make decisions about selling your property if he determines it's necessary to pay for your care," Bill continued, pointing to a paragraph that was actually David's own words about putting the house on the market quickly. David was practically glowing. Everything was going exactly as he'd planned. "And this section," Bill said, turning to another page, "allows your son to make decisions about your living arrangements, including moving you to a care facility if he determines it's necessary for your health and safety." I watched David's face as Bill read the words. My son was so focused on the victory he thought he was achieving that he didn't notice the specific language being used. He didn't realize that Bill was quoting his own emails about having me declared mentally incompetent and moving me to Sunset Manor against my will. "This is all very standard," David said to me, his voice dripping with false reassurance. "Thousands of families do this every year. It's the responsible thing to do." There was that word again, responsible. "And this final document," Bill continued, "acknowledges that you understand you've been experiencing some memory issues and confusion, and that you trust your son to act in your best interests even when you might not understand what's happening." This was the crucial moment. If David had any conscience left, any genuine love for me at all, this was when he would stop the charade, when he would admit that I wasn't experiencing memory issues, that I was perfectly capable of making my own decisions, that this entire exercise was unnecessary. Instead, he leaned forward and spoke to Bill as if I wasn't even in the room. "He has been getting more confused lately," David said, his voice filled with fake concern. "Sometimes he forgets conversations we've had, gets disoriented about dates and times. Last week I found him standing in his garage at 2 a.m., saying he was looking for his car keys, but his car was right there in the driveway. That was a complete lie. I'd never done anything like that. But David was creating a fictional narrative of my mental decline to justify what he was about to do to me." Bill nodded sympathetically. "That's very common at his age, unfortunately. You're being very responsible by planning ahead." Responsible. The word that would forever be associated with David's betrayal. "Where do I need to sign?" I asked, playing my role perfectly. David eagerly pointed to signature lines throughout the documents. I signed each one carefully, watching my son's face light up with each stroke of my pen. He thought he'd successfully manipulated his confused old father into giving away his independence and his property. What he'd actually done was sign a confession to attempted elder abuse and fraud. "There," Bill said, gathering up the papers and placing them back in his briefcase. "Everything is properly executed and legally binding. Mr. Thompson, your son now has the authority to make important decisions about your life and property." David could barely contain his excitement. "Thank you so much, Attorney Wilson. This gives me such peace of mind, knowing I can take proper care of Dad. Just remember," Bill said, playing his role to the end, "these documents give you significant power over your father's life. I trust you'll use that power responsibly." There was that word one more time. After Attorney Wilson left, David stayed for a few minutes to savor his victory. He walked around my house like he already owned it, making mental notes about what would need to be done to prepare it for sale. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said, patting my shoulder with false affection. "You made a very wise decision today. Now you don't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of everything." "When will you start taking care of things?" I asked innocently. "Soon," David said, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Very soon. I'm going to call Sunset Manor tomorrow morning and tell them you're ready to move in. And I'll start organizing your finances, maybe contact some real estate agents about putting the house on the market." "The house?" I asked, injecting confusion into my voice. David's expression became patient, condescending. "Dad, we talked about this. You can't maintain this big house anymore. It's too much for you. The money from selling it will pay for your care at Sunset Manor for many years." Many years. David was planning to warehouse me in a nursing home for years, while he spent every dollar I'd worked my entire life to save. "I understand," I said quietly. "Good. I knew you'd come around once you understood what was best for everyone, meaning best for David and Linda." "I should go," David said, checking his watch. "Linda's making dinner, and I want to tell her the good news, that everything's finally settled." He kissed my cheek at the door the same way he used to when he was a little boy, but this kiss felt like the kiss of Judas, a gesture of false love masking complete betrayal. "I love you, Dad," he said. "I'm going to take such good care of you." I watched him drive away, his car disappearing into the grey afternoon, and felt a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction. David thought he'd won the greatest victory of his life. He had no idea he'd just signed his own confession. That evening I called Bill Morrison. "How did I do?" I asked. "Oscar-worthy performance," Bill replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. David walked right into it. "We have everything we need." Did he really sign a confession? He signed multiple confessions. Documents admitting to financial fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit theft, and about 6 other felonies, all in his own handwriting, witnessed and notarized. What happens now? Now we wait for him to take the next step. As soon as he tries to use those fake documents, as soon as he calls Sunset Manor or contacts a real estate agent, we'll have him on additional charges. And the confession he unknowingly signed will make it very difficult for him to claim he had innocent intentions. I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet house, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief that my plan had worked. Satisfaction that David would face consequences for his actions. But also a deep, profound sadness that it had come to this. The son I'd raised, the little boy who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories, the young man I'd been so proud to call my child, was gone. The person who remained was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and my money. The next morning, David called bright and early, his voice full of excitement and barely contained greed. "Dad, I talked to Sunset Manor last night. They have a room ready for you. We can move you in this weekend." "This weekend?" "That seems very fast. The sooner the better, Dad. You'll love it there. And I can start taking care of the house situation right away." The house situation. He was already planning to sell my beloved home, the place where Margaret and I had built our life together. "David," I said carefully, "before we do anything drastic, I'd like you to come over. There's something important we need to discuss." "What's that, Dad?" "I'll explain when you get here. Can you come this afternoon?" "Sure, Dad. Is everything okay? You sound different." "Everything's fine. I just need to talk to you about something." An hour later, David arrived at my house, still riding high on his expected victory. He found me sitting in the living room with several manila folders spread across the coffee table. "What's all this?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Sit down, son. We need to have a very serious conversation." David sat, but I could see wariness creeping into his expression. Something about my tone was different from what he'd expected. "David," I said quietly, "how long have you been planning to steal from me?" The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. "What are you talking about?" I opened the first folder and pulled out printed copies of his emails, the ones I'd discovered on my computer weeks ago. "I know about your financial problems. I know about your plans to have me declared mentally incompetent. I know about your arrangement with Sunset Manor. I know everything." David stared at the emails, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For several long seconds he couldn't form words. "Dad, I can explain." Can you explain why my son, the boy I raised with my own hands, has been planning to destroy my life to solve his money problems?" David's shock was giving way to something else. Something that looked like panic mixed with anger. "Those emails are private," he said, his voice getting louder. "You had no right to read them. On my own computer. Using accounts you created without telling me." "I had every right." David stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Fine. You want the truth?" "Yes, I need money. Yes, I'm behind on my mortgage. Yes, my business is failing. But so what? You're going to die soon anyway. What do you need this big house for? What do you need all that money for?" And there it was. The truth finally. David didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as an inconvenient obstacle between him and my inheritance. "You're selfish," he continued, his voice rising to a shout. "You have more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I'm losing everything." "I'm your son." "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my son's face, and felt the last of my love for him die. "It used to mean everything to me," I said quietly. "But you're not my son anymore." David's anger reached a boiling point. "I am your son. And those papers you signed yesterday give me the legal right to make decisions for you whether you like it or not." I smiled sadly. "No, David, they don't." "What do you mean?" I opened the second folder and pulled out the real documents I'd signed with Bill Morrison, the real power of attorney forms, the real will, the real medical directives. "What you signed yesterday wasn't a power of attorney," I said calmly. "It was a confession, a detailed confession of your entire scheme, witnessed and notarized. Attorney Wilson was actually my lawyer, Bill Morrison. Every word you said was recorded. Every lie you told was documented." David grabbed the papers, reading frantically. As the truth sank in, his face went through a series of emotions. Shock, denial, rage, and finally pure fear. "You can't do this to me," he whispered. "I'm your son." "No," I said, standing up slowly. "You were my son. The man standing in my living room is a criminal who tried to steal my life." That's when David's composure broke completely. David's breakdown was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. The confident, manipulative man who had entered my house an hour earlier was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. He started shouting, his voice cracking with desperation and rage. "You did this on purpose," he screamed, waving the confession papers in the air. "You tricked me. You set me up." "Yes," I said calmly. "I did. You can't use this against me. It's entrapment. It won't hold up in court. David, I'm not a police officer. I'm your father, and you voluntarily confessed to planning elder abuse and fraud. No one forced you to sign those papers." He was pacing frantically now, his face red with anger and panic. "This is insane. You're insane. I was trying to help you. Help me by stealing my house? Help me by having me declared mentally incompetent? Help me by locking me away in a nursing home against my will?" David stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression twisted with something that looked like hatred. "You know what your problem is, Dad? You've always been selfish. Even when I was a kid, everything was about you and Mom. Your house, your rules, your decisions. I was never good enough, was I? Nothing I did was ever good enough for you. The accusation hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain calm. David, your mother and I loved you. We sacrificed everything for you. We paid for your education, helped you start your business, supported you through every failure and disappointment." "Supported me? You criticized me. Every choice I made, every girlfriend I brought home, every business decision. You always knew better, didn't you? Well, guess what? Your perfect little family is falling apart, and it's all your fault." I looked at this man, my son, and realized that he truly believed what he was saying. In his mind, he was the victim. I was the villain who had somehow forced him to plan elaborate fraud schemes against his own father. "David," I said quietly, "I want you to leave my house. Right now, and I don't want you to come back." His expression changed to something like panic. "Dad, wait. Let's talk about this rationally. We can work something out. I'll pay you back everything, I promise. Just don't do anything crazy with those papers. Pay me back with what money? You just told me your business is failing and you're behind on your mortgage. I'll figure something out. I always do. That was David's problem right there. He always expected to figure something out, instead of working honestly for what he needed. He always looked for shortcuts, schemes, ways to get around doing the hard work that everyone else had to do. No, David, we can't work anything out. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I don't want that person in my life." David tried a different approach, his voice becoming pleading, almost childlike. "Dad, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was desperate. I wasn't thinking clearly. You can't abandon your only son over one mistake." "One mistake?" "David, you spent months planning this. You researched nursing homes, contacted real estate agents, created fake email accounts. You looked me in the eye and lied to me repeatedly. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my life." David's pleading turned back to anger. "Fine, you want to know the truth? You're a bitter old man who's sitting on a fortune while his own son loses everything. Mom would be ashamed of you. That was the final straw. Using Margaret's memory to try to manipulate me one last time was unforgivable. Get out, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Get out of my house right now before I call the police. David grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, but he turned back one last time. You'll regret this, he said, his voice full of venom. You'll die alone in this house and nobody will care. Nobody will even find your body for weeks. I watched him drive away, his car disappearing down the street for what I knew would be the last time. Instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The house was quiet after David left, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of loneliness. It was the peaceful quiet of a home where I could finally be myself, make my own decisions, live according to my own choices. That evening, I called Bill Morrison to report on what had happened. How are you feeling? He asked after I described David's breakdown and departure. Free, I said, and meant it. What do you want to do about pressing charges? We have enough evidence to send him to prison for several years. I thought about it carefully. David deserved to face consequences for what he'd tried to do, but he was still my son despite everything. Let's wait and see what he does next, I said finally. If he tries to contact me again, if he makes any more threats, we'll file charges immediately. But for now, let's just make sure he knows we have all the evidence we need. You're being more generous than he deserves, Bill said. Maybe. But I'm doing it for the boy he used to be, not the man he's become. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from David's attorney. In it, David formally renounced any claim to my property and promised never to contact me again. In exchange, I agreed not to press criminal charges for his attempted fraud. It was a clean break, final and complete. David was out of my life forever. 6 months have passed since that confrontation in my living room. I still live in the house Margaret and I built together, the home David tried so hard to steal from me. But everything feels different now. I wake up each morning in my own bed in my own house, making my own decisions about how to spend my day. There's no one questioning my mental capacity, no one trying to manipulate me into signing away my rights, no one planning to warehouse me in a nursing home against my will. I've made some changes to my life, all positive ones. I hired a housekeeper who comes twice a week to help with cleaning, not because I can't do it myself, but because I choose to spend my time on things I enjoy more. I've started volunteering at the local animal shelter, something Margaret always wanted us to do together. I've joined a book club at the library and made several new friends. Most importantly, I've taken steps to protect other elderly people from the kind of scheme David tried to pull on me. I've worked with Bill Morrison to create a foundation that provides legal assistance to seniors who are being financially exploited by family members. We've helped dozens of people escape similar situations. The foundation is funded entirely by my estate. The money David was so desperate to steal is now being used to protect other parents from children like him. I've heard through mutual acquaintances that David and Linda moved to another state after declaring bankruptcy. Their house was foreclosed on, and David's business finally collapsed completely. They're starting over somewhere else, and I hope that experience teaches them to live honestly. But that's not my concern anymore. David made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. I've also heard that they've been telling people I'm a cruel, selfish old man who abandoned his son in his time of need. They're welcome to that story if it helps them sleep at night. The people who matter, the people who actually know me, understand the truth. Yesterday was Margaret's birthday. I spent the morning tending her rose garden, which is more beautiful now than it ever was when she was alive. I like to think she's watching over me, proud that I finally found the strength to stand up for myself. In the afternoon, I had lunch with Bill Morrison and his wife. We've become close friends through this ordeal, and they've essentially become my chosen family. We talked about books, travel plans, the foundation's work, normal conversations between people who respect and care about each other. As I drove home that evening, I realized something profound. For the first time in my adult life, I'm completely free. Free from David's manipulation and demands. Free from the guilt I used to feel about not being able to fix our relationship. Free from the obligation to sacrifice my own happiness for someone who didn't appreciate it. I'm 67 years old, and I'm just now learning what it means to live for myself. Some people might think I was too harsh with David, that a father should forgive his son no matter what. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to continue hurting you. It doesn't mean pretending that abuse is acceptable, because it comes from family. David didn't make a simple mistake. He didn't ask for help and get turned down. He systematically planned to steal my independence, my property, and my dignity. He was willing to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away for the rest of my life. Also, he could access my money. That's not love. That's not family. That's predatory behavior, and it doesn't deserve forgiveness just because we share the same last name. I sleep peacefully in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own choices. Margaret's pillow is still on her side of the bed, and her pictures still fill our bedroom. The grandfather clock still chimes every hour, marking time in the home we built together. But now those sounds comfort me instead of reminding me of loss. This house is no longer a monument to the past. It's a celebration of my freedom and independence. If you're watching this and you recognize something familiar in my story, please don't wait as long as I did to take action. If someone in your life is pressuring you to give up your independence, questioning your mental capacity, or trying to gain control over your finances, trust your instincts. Seek help. Contact an attorney, talk to friends, reach out to adult protective services if necessary. You have the right to live in your own home, make your own decisions, and control your own property for as long as you're mentally competent. Don't let anyone, not even family members, take that away from you. I thought David's betrayal would destroy me. Instead, it set me free. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. I'm Robert Thompson. I'm 67 years old, and I'm finally living my own life on my own terms. And let me tell you something. If you're brave enough to stand up for yourself, if you're strong enough to face the truth about the people who claim to love you, you can be free too. Margaret always used to say that every ending is really a beginning. I understand what she meant now. David's betrayal wasn't the end of my family. It was the beginning of my real life, and that life is pretty damn good. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there who might be facing a similar situation. Remember, you're never too old to start over, and it's never too late to choose yourself.